Greetings, this is Matt Fiello, Technical Marketing Engineer with the Cisco Cloud Networking Compute BU, and we're back with another Intersight Managed Mode Expert Series video. Today we're going to be talking about the Ethernet Adapter Policy, one of our IMM Server Profile policies, and with that let's cover a few slides and then a short demo at the end. Before we get started with the adapter policy, let's talk a little bit about Intersight IIS server policy. So there's 38 total policies. That includes both your FI attached policies for Intersight Managed Mode as well as standalone server policies. So of those 38 total policies, 29 of these policies apply to Intersight Managed Mode. In other words, managing servers through a Fabric Interconnect. The 9 highlighted policies you see here largely apply to standalone C-Series, albeit we have an NTP policy there that shows up as well for your domain policies as part of your domain profile. That's the reason you're not putting an NTP policy in a server profile for FI, attached server or blade or compute node. And again, for this video, we will be focusing on the Ethernet adapter policy. Okay, so let's talk about the Ethernet adapter policy and what it is. It's basically configuring your host side VIC, specifically each and every VNIC that's part of that LAN connectivity policy with the appropriate settings based on your operating system or your particular use case. Now, there's a lot of settings, and it would be a nightmare to have to craft those settings or populate each one of those settings from scratch. But thank goodness you don't have to do that because we provide you in Intersight Managed Mode with 16 default configurations. Okay, so you do have to create the policy, you have to give it a name, click Next, but then you'll be able to use a pull down and grab one of those 16 default configurations, be it a Windows server, be it a VMware server, etc. Now, the thing is you can't change those 16 default configurations, but what you can do is create the policy, leverage one of those 16, okay, and then once you've created the policy, you can go back in and edit the policy and tweak any one of those settings that you need to tweak. So, is this Ethernet adapter policy required? Well, like the majority of IMM policies, it's not absolutely required to successfully deploy a server profile to the endpoint, to the server. But you're going to want to use this policy. It is a very important policy as far as network performance goes. So you're going to want to use the policy and pick, at the very least, the correct default. And speaking of those defaults, we've already mentioned them. They're there for your usage. It's not like Cisco created those in the blind. Those defaults are created in conjunction, in collaboration with the OS vendor, the particular use case, and you're going to absolutely want to use those. Now, outside of those defaults, then perhaps you're going to want to go to some kind of vendor-provided document, or in the case of Cisco, a Cisco-validated design, and make changes accordingly based on those designs. If you're just experimenting, then I would highly recommend you do that in a lab environment and not experiment in a production environment. So as far as verification is concerned, we can use the API Explorer accessed via the device console in the Fabric Interconnect. We can log into the Fabric Interconnect, see our inventory, go to the specific server that we wish, launch the API Explorer for that server, and then issue the following Redfish commands. And I'll take you through each one of these commands because it kind of builds for information. Some of it is a no-brainer if you're working with one chassis in a lab. For instance, it's going to be chassis 1, but I'll show you how that information is obtained and what the output looks like. And as with all IMM Expert Series videos, I like to include a graphic to kind of show how the policy is used by the server profile template. So If you see the server profile template on the left, and we go down to the LAN connectivity policy, and then from that LAN connectivity policy, we see the Ethernet adapter policy. So it is indeed an embedded policy. So the LAN activity policy is the place where you will attach the Ethernet adapter policy for each and every VNIC that you craft in your LAN connectivity policy. Okay, so for the demonstration, here we are in Intersight, specifically Infrastructure Service, and we go down to Policies, and we're going to create a policy, and we're going to filter on UCS Server Policies, and then select Ethernet Adapter. Click Start. We want to use a meaningful name. It helps if you put something in the name to kind of delineate what your configuration is going to be for this policy. And you can also use the description down here to help with that. But here is your selection of your default configurations. Okay, so you have a lot of options here. Highly recommend, in the absence of any other guidance, to absolutely use one of these defaults that best correlates with your use case, with your operating system. And then if you have something more in-depth, like a Cisco validated design, then certainly follow that design. But let's go ahead and select Windows. And as the slide stated earlier, I can't change anything right now on that Windows default, okay? But what I can do is I can create the policy with the Windows default configuration, and then I can go back in and edit the policy, and I can tweak any of the settings. So let's go ahead and click Next. And speaking of settings, okay, you're seeing a bunch of settings here. So there's a lot of queues, there's a lot of capabilities here, which is a good thing, okay, to maximize performance, but it would be a bad thing if you selected the wrong thing, all right, for your particular use case. So be careful with this. If you're going to play around, you're going to experiment, certainly do that in the lab. Otherwise, use the defaults or follow guidance, specific validated designs. So let's go ahead and create this policy. And that completes the policy creation. Okay, so once we've created our adapter policy and we've deployed it down to the server, you might want to check out the endpoint, the server endpoint, kind of verify the settings. If that's the case, then a way of doing that is actually going to the device console or your Fabric Interconnect. So go ahead and log into that. Now in that device console, we have an inventory tab, and I'm going to choose my first server. So I'm going to use the nuggets here, the breadcrumbs, and launch my API Explorer. Now in this API Explorer, there's some examples, and we're actually using this example about adapter Ethernet interface details, etc. So if you want to follow an example in the documentation, this is basically what we're going to be doing here in the demonstration. So with that, we're going to click up here at the top of the bar in the middle to API reference, and we're going to scroll down to chassis. Now these are the commands that I put on the slide, and of course they're also in that guide that I just showed you. But if you need to get your chassis ID, you can simply do a get, and the chassis ID that we're going to be working with is 1. I already knew that, and you will likely also. But let's go ahead and walk this thing according to the example. The next one is, now that we have our chassis ID, is network adapters. So probably the toughest thing is to pick the right one here. Here's chassis ID / network adapters. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put the chassis ID in. Click Next. Okay, and now we've got the network adapter ID. So you're going to want to record that. Okay. The next command is chassis ID network adapters, network adapter ID, and then network device functions. So if we scroll down more, here we go. And we know what the chassis ID is. And now we know what the adapter ID is from the prior command. And we click send. And of course, you know, we're likely knowing this information already. All right, the VNIC 0, VNIC 1, that's the two virtual interfaces that I have. Okay, but I'm just, again, being complete and walking you down through the flow here. So then the last one that we're going to go to is network adapter / network adapter ID / network device function / network device function ID. So we just keep getting more granular here. Okay, so here's the command that we're needing here. This is the chassis ID, network adapter ID, network device function ID, that's actually VNIC 0 or VNIC 1 in my case. And if we make this a little bit more legible, we can see here that we're now inside that VNIC and its settings, and we can see the different settings of that adapter policy. So just a good way that you can check, okay, if you want to, on the endpoint, exactly what has been configured with the policy and the deployment of the server profile. So that completes our video about Ethernet adapter policies. I hope you were able to learn something, pick up a few tips. Stay tuned for more Intersight Managed Mode Expert Series videos. Thank you.